You are not Negro, black, colored, Morisco, nor an African slave. Copyright 2014, 2020, Khalifa Media. Written by Grand Sheikh, Brother Cujo Adwo L., Moorish Science Temple of America, Subordinate Temple No. 5, Toronto, Canaanland. Edited by Sister Tahida S. Naji Ola L., Moorish Science Temple, California, Inc. All rights reserved. Without prejudice. No part of this book may be reproduced or transmitted in any form by any means, electronic, photocopying, mechanical, recording, information storage or retrieval system, unless for the liberation of minds and gaining knowledge of self. 3. How did Moors get stuck with the Negro label? Quote, the institution of slavery, which had long since died out in the rest of Europe, had here in the Iberian Peninsula survived for a number of reasons, especially because of the continuing wars with the Moors, which lasted until the very year of the discovery of America, 1492. Source: Tannenbaum, 1992. Quote, starting American history in 1492 in honor of Columbus was the beginning of deception and planted the thought that this is where it all began instead of where it ended. 1 minute earlier, December 31, 1491, where the decree was made to black a Moor out of his story. Source: Who were the Negroes before slavery? Gorham Bay and Rosser L., 2000. Negro is a Spanish word that means black, and the Spanish under the guise of Queen Isabella, King Ferdinand and Cardinal Jimenez were the ones who stripped the Moors of their culture, language, ceremonies, customs and even their names in 1501 AD. Moors who failed to submit to the now ruling power of Spain were exiled to North Africa and the Atlantis Islands or killed through the decree of Charles V in 1526 AD. Charles V also bribed many electors of the Roman Empire to name him the Holy Roman Emperor, giving him rule over more countries than any other European monarch. Those who were baptized into Christianity were termed Moriscos. These Moriscos made a final stand in 1570 to reclaim Granada, but were unsuccessful in their campaign. No less than 3 million Moors were banished between 1492 and 1600. During the rule of the Moors, Spain was the center of civilization in Europe, and to this day, mosques continue to stand as the foundation of Spanish churches. No other European country has ever come close to the 800-year legacy of the Moors in Spain. Quote, as a matter of fact, the Negro was never a slave. To conceive the design of enslaving an individual, we must presuppose that he is free. The first act of enslaving is to deprive him of his liberty. This the Negro never had, since the creation of man. The Negro is an ape, hence his status in the universe, his relation to man, like that of every other animal, was fixed irrevocably by God in the creation, and no act upon man's part, whether legislative, executive, or judicial, can change it. Source: The Negro a Beast or in the Image of God, Carroll, 1900. The Negro status as an identity for Moors is a fiction to say the least, based on the information presented thus far. One of the most proven, factual cases to date to pinpoint the fraud of unconscious Moors being labeled Negroes was the Dred Scott case brought in 1857. Source: Scott v. Sanford. 60 U.S. 393, 1857. In the Dred Scott case, the United States Supreme Court ruled that descendants of Africans who were Negro slaves were not included or intended to be included under the word citizen, whether emancipated or not, and remained without rights or privileges except such as those which the government was willing to grant them. Let's read that again. In the Dred Scott case, the United States Supreme Court ruled that descendants of Africans who were Negro slaves were not included or intended to be included under the word citizen, whether emancipated or not, and remained without rights or privileges except such as those which the government was willing to grant them. So, here it is, plain and simple as a matter of law. Descendants of Africans who were Negro slaves have no rights or privileges. Consider this excerpt from Justice Daniel's opinion on the case. Quote, "Now the following are truths which a knowledge of the history of the world and particularly of our own country compels us to know that the African Negro race never have been acknowledged as belonging to the family of nations, that as amongst them there never has been known or recognized by the inhabitants of other countries anything partaking of the character of nationality, civil or political policy, that this race has been by all nations of Europe regarded as subjects of capture or purchase, as subjects of commerce or traffic, and that the introduction of that race into every section of this country was not as members of a civil or political society, but as property in the strictest sense of the term." Source: Scott v. Sanford, 1857. The Supreme Court of the United States has never overturned this ruling, so it stands at law that Negroes can never be citizens, and their introduction to the Americas was as property, not citizens. This is why the charge against Dred Scott was plaintiff in error. He brought his complaint before the court as free slave, when slaves in general had no rights or privileges. He was misrepresenting himself to the court as Scott, when his true Moorish title and identity in the Americas would have been El or Bey. Why have none of the black African scholars used this information, this finding in law, to show the people that being a Moor is not a third-party perspective opinion? It is a very clearly documented fact that Negroes are the misnomered Moors. The bigger question is, if Negroes are Moors, then what is a Negro? Quote, "Negro Yavira Arabo Troglodyte Niger Negro Yavira Arabo and Troglodyte Niger were the ancient names given to the black chimpanzee monkey primate by the ancient Moabite peoples of southwest Emexim, South Africa, South America. The Negroes troglodytes proliferated the Southlands, past and present, and can be found abundantly around the Amazon River Valley of Southwest Africa, America and the surrounding areas." Source: Nigger Industry 1 and 2, Taj Tariq Bey, 2007. Quote, "None of us was allowed to see a book or try to learn. They say, we get smarter than they was if we learned anything. If you just looked like you wanted to read or write, you got a lickin'. Or were sold." Source: Narrative of Jenny Proctor, Enslaved in Alabama 1850 to 1865, Proctor 1937.